Yo, what is up, everybody? So today I wanted to go over decks for Frostfall, not entire deck builds, but just kind of going over what I think would be the best deck for each element going into Frostfall. I'm not putting in a whole deck list here, just kind of the core for the deck and the archetypes that I think would be very powerful going into Frostfall. So without further ado, let's just jump into Frost, because that's our new toy, and Frost is interesting. I do wholeheartedly believe that More Frost will be the best deck in Frost, mostly because the engine itself is super consistent. And when I say it's super consistent, right, we have Lycan. Lycan just goes and searches out like Indus and A-Bomb, and then you play Indus. Your opponent doesn't want to crack into it to lose a rune. You then can ascend Indus over into A-Bomb. A-Bomb disenchant, get Indus back, fill up your underworld even more, get A-Bomb pretty much right up to 6 attack pretty quickly. Granted, there's a lot of taxes there because you do have to disenchant from the Morphrost to do. You have to tax for the search, you have to tax for the search, so it can get pretty expensive, but it's expensive for crazy consistency once you pick up that Lycan. On top of that, you can support this package with Kion, where you can just grab the Lycan back. So turn 1, you could literally go Lycan, grab 2 Morphrost, Kion, grab Lycan back from Underworld, and then grab 2 more Morphrost from your deck again, thinning your deck pretty efficiently. And then the next turn you can do that again if you have to, and kind of build up pressure from that. On the side, you have like things like Enfrostics as support as well. That goes well with the A-Bomb, goes well with the Indus. You're filling up your Underworld with your various Morphrosts. You can pick them up with Enfrostics. Enfrostics also combos really well with Kion. So you can go Enfrostics, grab A-Bomb, Kion Enfrostics back to hand, grab another A-Bomb, get 2 special A-Bombs into play kind of sort of deal. And then additionally, you can support all of this, especially since it gets very taxy on your spirits, with Cryoling. And you do that because you can Cryoling special ascend into Cryovern, making Cryoling in the mid to late game basically a normal cast 7 attack Elestral. Kind of how we see our Lits go into like just normal casting 2-drops. Cryoling's almost a normal cast 2-drop as well, that has a little bit more suppression resistance, where something like A-Bomb is weak to suppression like Crackid or Cockatoodle, or even Gorgon's Gaze in the battle step. Cryoling will rapidly ascend into a base 7 attacker, hopefully letting you get around some of the possible tech pieces that people would bring into you to get rid of A-Bomb. So I do think Cryoling also has a place in this deck as kind of the endgame finisher to go alongside your Abominable as your payoff. This is what I think the best Frost deck is going to be for set 2. Moving on, Thunder. It's basically just Thunder Nexus again. I legitimately think Thunder Nexus is still competing. I do have Platypulse and Race to the Top here in separate rows for a reason. I don't think that those added to Thunder Nexus will make Thunder Nexus a better deck. The Platypulse just gives minus stats for every Thunder enchanted on it, but if you're playing in a mirror match, Platypulse is a dead card. If you're playing against anyone who can heck in 1 Thunder Spirit on an aggressive body at the right time, Platypulse is a useless card. I think there's too much counterplay to it to make it consistently strong. I could see it brought in from a side deck option to go against something like Earth Beatdown, yes, still relevant, and possibly other aggressive decks. Otherwise, I don't see Platypulse seeing play. And Race to the Top, I don't know if this include is good enough to put into Thunder Nexus. Obviously, Mount Olympus will help a lot of the 4 attack stats in Thunder Nexus, like Spark Hit, like Toxin, like Elechick. So the Stadium's not a bad include, but having to add in probably Jolton, Race to the Top, and Mount Olympus into your Thunder Nexus package might make the Thunder Nexus package a little bit more consistent when you'd rather run things like maybe Earthquake and Viserys as your sub package, as opposed to adding in additional Thunder cards to the package. But if you try to do Thunder Nexus and cut out the Earth, it's a good option. But I think otherwise just Thunder Nexus at its core is still strong enough to compete. I don't think anything really got pushed out of the format here, and it's still going to be something that you're going to relevantly have to look at. So for Earth, I think Earth Beatdown's still the most relevant Earth deck. There are some additions you can make to it, though I don't think that they're consistent enough. With Cyprong and Mostation being basically a 6 attacker, that forces itself to go into defense after attacks, making it pretty weak to crackbacks And Cyprong's is good. I'm already a head card, so I don't see that seeing a ton of addition. But the core is still here. Viserys, Equalinks, Rumbagems, Demeters, Tectauruses, following up with Earthquake because you're an element. And the one thing I do want to mention is I think Fully Forest is going to be a bit more relevant. We saw early Earth Beatdown decks run Fully Forest. I think that's going to come back into favor just because we'll probably see more like Atlantis play, more Mount Olympus play, maybe Mountain of Boreas in like a tier 2-ish Frost deck. There's some like Frost Zoo stuff you can do. So I think Fully Forest will be relevant again. Maybe not as a full 3 of include, but I do think a 1 of in the main deck might be an addition that you can put into a Frostfall Earth Beatdown deck to kind of combat some of the new stuff in Frostfall. Otherwise, you can rely on your Equalinks to disrupt it, or just have it in your sideboard to mess around with. But at its core, Earth Beatdown is still going to be a pretty aggressive, wide deck that I think will be relevant for Frostfall over any other Earth deck. Maybe you could say Wasp Ivy might have a chance of being played. Gigaflora is pretty powerful, but I don't know if there's enough build around for Gigaflora to see enough play. But there's tools there, but for the most part, Earth Beatdown probably still the best Earth deck. Moving on to Water, I think the best Water deck is going to be some sort of Locagon stall deck here. So you have lots of really interesting kind of Nexus and stall tools, draw power in Water that could make it pretty powerful. Just Locagon is a good finisher. I think you realistically maybe run 1 or 2, but having access in element to 2 really good stall tools, the Drutagwa and Sluggle, you know, you can play your counter runes to kind of stall your opponent out, use these cards to keep recovering spirits. Kind of late game, if you get into the Locagon, you can then play Ambrosias and Drutagwa, Sluggle again to start burning and popping your opponent's cards. And then additionally, as you kind of go into the late game stalling, you build up Locagon's power, so when you finally get to ascend into it, that'll be your closeout for the game. You have consistency tools in like Foamy, Afros can get you a ton of draw with Poseidon. If you are able to get Drutagwa, Poseidon, and Afros into play, you can basically recover spirits and draw cards at the same time, which is pretty consistently powerful, especially if you're playing a stall or control style deck where you want to keep pulling counter runes and removal. I think that's a pretty powerful combo there. Poseidon is going to be a little bit more relevant here since you can play Drutagwa, Poseidon, and recover spirits every turn by nexusing over to Drutagwa, potentially building up some defense and power with an Atlantis in play. And with that as well, you can use Rise from the Depths to kind of get cheap special casts back with Sluggle and Drutagwa, making your special cast out of your Underworld with those cards, netting you spirits, not losing you spirits, and giving you possible Ascension fuel to go into Locagon in 1 turn, where you go like Atlantis, Rise from the Depths, Drutagwa, recover 2, ascend into Locagon, and then maybe play some Ambrosias or another Rise from the Depths or Rise from the Ashes even. Get the Drutagwa back, Nexus from Poseidon to it, pop another card, pop another card. I think this will probably be the best Water deck in the format, just a stall deck, into maybe 1 or 2 Locagon in the deck for the late game, after you've done this whole just recover, draw a bunch of cards, counter, remove, counter, etc. Throw in other viable Water options like Galaxy, etc. I think you have a pretty strong core for a stall control-y Water deck ending on Locagon. Next up, Wind. Wind gets a little interesting. So I do think the best Wind deck is going to be still a Wind Toolbox style just because of how consistently and powerful it is. Though, I think you can kind of see Wind pushing into a Nexus deck, kind of like Thunder Nexus, as the more viable option. With cards like Exaltair for burning, Pegas for rune removal, Namisail finally getting that recovery and wind that Wind's been wanting, as well as some other tools like Tower of Winds and Galaxair as kind of additional support removal like Sorlet has been in base set. I think you're going to see a Wind Toolbox Nexus focused strategy being kind of the top dog here. Additionally, that deck leads you into either just going normal like Toolbox Pantera route with like late game pull a Hydrake out, or you could potentially go into a Flammoth finisher as well now, especially with you go Flammoth, Aeolus search Pegas, and then you pop a rune, play Tower of the Winds, Nexus to Pegas off Aeolus, pop another rune, opening up the way for a Flammoth or Pantera from hand with Tower of the Winds. Pretty powerful endgame finisher combo stuff there. Again, you get the additional removal tools like Galaxair is going to be pretty consistent at getting over high attack things with low defense. Sorlet likewise also helps with that, except it's a little bit more expensive, but does have the bigger body to boot. So Wind, Nexus, Toolbox, loosely I think will be the best Wind. And last but not least, the best Fire core deck is going to be some sort of Burn, probably. It's really hard to still find a home for Fire. Krakatuga is still relevant in Water Fire kind of situation, but finding a core Fire deck is still difficult. You do have probably the strongest card in the format in Lavalith. You have access to interesting new tools like Comagma for consistency and Exalt Flare to quick ascend into something like Waspire. You can play a Nexus strategy where you can kind of go like Hephaestus, Exalt Flare, Circle the Sky, load up a Waspire, throw a bunch of fire at your opponent, followed up with some Eruptions. There's something there that I do think that Waspire gets a pretty powerful consistency bump and kind of a dangerous like out of nowhere burn potential with Exalt Flare. So I do think as a Fire core deck, which unfortunately we didn't get a ton of new fire tools that make this relevant, you could argue that maybe Caperfume goes in this deck. I don't know if Caperfume is really that great. It's a way to go really super wide in fire, which is cool. I think it has some synergy with kind of Ignectar, where you can still kind of do the turn 1 Ignectar stuff, have, you know, space to ascend into Caperfume, maybe special cast some stuff from your deck and go super wide and aggressive in fire. But I think the consistency that like a burn deck will generally have in fire is better than Caperfume. Again, you go Waspire, you have your Necruff, you have Ignectars, Eruptions, Exalt Flare. Exalt Flare also gets you into Lavalith if you need to and you can't special, or not special, but meet its normal casting requirements, etc. So I do think Waspire Burn is going to be a little bit relevant. I don't think that this deck is going to be great or even that good. It's just probably better than Caperfume, and Fire still is going to struggle, I think, as a core build around element. Unfortunate, but yeah, that is what I think the best deck for each element core would be for Frostfall. Let me know what you guys think below and what decks you're interested in playing. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video and have a great one.